In 96, when the talks were declared, and there was only 6 weeks between the talks being declared and the actual elections, we realised that they had announced that the first 10 parties to get a sufficient votes would be sitting at the table. And so one night, Avla and I had a discussion, and I said, you know, it's possible that if these political parties don't put any women at the table, that women should get organised. And we began to laugh about it and talk about it. We said, well, why don't we just put it up to the parties and write to them and ask them, which we did. Their response was negative. They didn't see it as an issue, and many of them didn't even respond to the letters. So then we said, why don't we ask the Women's European Platform, run by Brona Hines, to send messages out to everybody to come to a meeting to discuss the possibility of forming a women's political party. But it was, again, all in the spirit of a vanguard action, to show them that there were women in Northern Ireland willing to stand for election, willing to have their voices heard, because what you heard from the other parties was the unionist parties, they couldn't find any women, and they didn't know who these women would be that would be interested in politics. The Nationalist and Republican parties were a bit more concerned about our initiative in that they felt that they had already been involved in smaller numbers, but still involved, and that we were taking the picture away from them and away from the focus of the conflict by just demanding that women get involved. And we said, no, it's not just a gender issue, it's also an issue in terms of how women work in terms of the process, being more inclusive, and also some of the interests that we have that may never get on the table if we're not there. So that was around April 1996. And so it was fast and furious from then on. There was meetings on Saturdays, then meetings during the week. We had to form a constitution, we had to raise money, we had to, by the certain date, we had to register all the names. And we did it by flip charts, sticking them up on the wall in the Ulster People's College. And we asked women then, would you be prepared to stand in this district? The good thing was that it was the party that was standing, not me as an individual. So the women were nervous about their privacy being invaded or their pictures being taken and posters of them being hung on lampposts in terms of their concern about their family, which was always the case here in terms of being involved publicly in politics. Would there be repercussions? And we said, no, the whole party is what's standing, but we need names in every district in the 18 constituencies. So we had about 70 names as a result of that meeting, because people would say, well, if she can do it, I'll do it. It was like an evangelical meeting, women jumping up and saying, well, if you need somebody for that area, I'll do it. So they had to be the most anonymous people that ever stood for election, because nobody knew who they were. And they didn't want anybody to know who they were, but we needed to have them registered. We almost didn't get registered. I don't know if you ever heard that story. We were so busy filling in all the details and all the forms, names, addresses, postal codes, because they all had to be eligible in terms of the various areas. And I was looking at my watch, and the electoral office closes at 5 o'clock on that particular day. If you didn't lodge your papers, you weren't registered. And it was about 4 o'clock, and I said, right, we need to get out of here, get down to the Royal Avenue and around to the electoral office. We better go. And we ran straight into a bomb scare outside the Europa. The traffic was all backed up, and I hadn't a clue where the electoral office was. It was round by St Anne's Cathedral. But I remember jumping out of the car, taking all the papers with me and saying, I'm going to run. And then once I got out and started running, I realised I had no idea where I was running to. So this young woman who was in the car did know where the office had been, because she'd been down scouting the day before. And so she started running with me, but I was so desperate to get there, she couldn't keep up with me. And I came flying round the corner, and we'd organised a press all to be there. And I was so out of breath I couldn't speak. And May Blood was there waiting on me. And May said, you know, all the cameras are waiting to see if we were serious about launching this women's coalition. And I get to the door, and the doorkeeper opens the door, except I think he's the chief electoral officer. And I immediately present the credentials and said, we are the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, here are our papers. the world's cameras start rolling, including those from Japan. And then doorkeeper answers, I'm only the doorkeeper, love. He says, you have 4 more floors to go. And that was the first day of registration of the formal Northern Ireland Women's Coalition. We did make it 2 minutes to 5 and we got the papers registered. And from then on, it was just wildfire. Everybody had to be trained on how to use mobile phones. We had to start fundraising. We had to draft all rules and regulations of what you do and what you don't do in an election, how much you're allowed to spend. And then the famous poster, which was wave goodbye to dinosaurs. And that got us into no amount of trouble, as you can imagine. People in other parties asking, how dare you call us dinosaurs? And I said, is your name on that poster? No, it's not. Well, why are you self-identifying as a dinosaur? And that immediately raised a few hackles. But 2 of the very famous statements came from men who wouldn't say it now. One later became the First Minister, Peter Robinson, and the other was the Deputy First Minister, Seamus Mallon. And Peter Robinson said, where did these women come from? Don't they know that they should leave politics alone? And Seamus Mallon said, this women's coalition is a cult and it'll grow into itself and disappear. So people should stop paying attention to it. And when we realised the level of reaction, we realised that we really did need to get ourselves organised because this wasn't going to be an easy thing to do. But 6 weeks later, we got elected. We were the 9th party. We didn't even have to wait to be declared to be the 10th. And because the women did what women do, we asked 100 women to go out and get 100 votes each, which would make, I think my math, I hope, 10,000 votes. And we figured if we got 10,000 votes, we'd easily get over the line. And they took it on board and went out and canvassed and asked people, and we prepared press releases and we went on local radio all over the place. And people had known that we'd done the work the previous 25 years because women had been praised for crossing the lines when men couldn't, it was too dangerous. And were praised for sticking their necks above the parapet on difficult issues like like death riders, joy riders, and poverty issues. And there was many networks that were cross-community when nothing else was cross-community that involved women. And so there was a real preparedness. Having said that, there was also a real concern that we were jeopardising all the good work that had gone on with women on a cross-community basis by becoming political. And many people said, you'll now have blood on your hands because you're going into a political situation with all these people who have been the cause of the troubles. My view was that we all had something to offer. If you're part of the problem, you're part of the solution. And so we supported the ex-combatants, the people who were affiliated to paramilitaries. And we also supported the old constitutional parties being at the table. We supported the 2 governments, Irish and British governments. So our process was very different in that we had the principles of inclusion. Everyone who has something to offer should be there, when others advocated that those who had used violence in the past shouldn't be there. We also argued on human rights and equality. Those were the 3 principles brought back from the 1995 Beijing World Conference on Women, where a number of the women in the coalition had gone and brought all those big embroidered blankets with them and came back with the message that those were the 3 principles that would work best on a cross-community basis. It was the 3 things, equality, human rights and inclusion, that no matter whether women decided they were Republican, Unionist, Loyalist, whatever, they could agree on those principles. And that's how we operated.